May I request Dr. Sachchidanand Shukla, Chief Economist, Mahindra Group, to share with us the highlights of the recently released document Enhancing Competitiveness of India Vision 2025.
Good noon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to present the highlight of the just released report, Vision 2025 Enhancing Competitiveness of India. My job is relatively an easier one. I just have to summarize, take you through the highlights without really revealing anything from the report, because we want you to read these chapters written by the experts. What I'm going to do over the next few minutes is just walk you through the highlights, the context, and also a little bit of backdrop against which this report was written. So the purpose of this study, essentially if you look at the purpose of this study was, first of all, why should we be coming out with one more report on competitiveness, or why should we be choosing the 2025? I think the context is very, very important. We have chosen 2025 as the timeline because just now Mr. Vikram Mehta alluded to the changes that we are witnessing. These are once in a generation change, be it technology, be it geopolitics, be it the underlying economics or the socio-economic changes that we are witnessing. So it's very, very important not to lose sight looking at just the near term of the more important things. And again, there is no dearth of reports that on the India potential or the Indian economy over a longer period of time. So we thought from a chamber point of view that talking about the India story, the India competitiveness angle from a relatively medium term is going to be better suited, and therefore the baseline has been chosen to be 2025. Why competitiveness? I think the whole story, as you see, as world trade architecture is undergoing a change, fundamentally things have moved to value add or the concept of value added. And therefore competitiveness holds the key to everything that an economy does. And it is also very closely linked to human welfare if you look at it from a historical perspective. What we have also done, and why 2025, is also that we have tried to align some of these areas that would be of interest to all of us here, and also with the Niti Aayog, which has done a 3-year study, which is a short-term horizon, and also a longer-term action agenda, that the 7-year strategy that they have chosen to undertake. Just to begin with, we have to define competitiveness if we have to understand the context really. This is a definition from the World Economic Forum, the set of institutions, policies, and factors that determine the level of productivity of a country. And these are the key ingredients. Now, is there empirical evidence of competitiveness actually making a dent or a difference to the overall economic growth or the economic outcomes? I think it is very, very clear if you just look at the green bars on the chart here. These are relatively more competitive economies, the most competitive economies within the chosen subset. And you can see, I'm just going to be talking about a few names. The US, the extreme left green bar, and Denmark, etc. And the right one is the least competitive economies. Now, the way they've chosen or depicted this is the top 3 most competitive versus the bottom 3 in terms of competitiveness or least competitive economies. And you can see the average growth rate. There is a big difference. When you're talking about growth in the context of developed economies, a 2% number is or 2% delta is actually very big. When we move towards the other high income or upper middle income, you can see that the delta is actually becoming much larger. The upper middle income, for example, you can see a bigger difference between these two. Even if you move to the low income economies, where you have Vietnam, Pakistan, I mean, I'm talking about the extreme right, the green one, versus the likes of Zimbabwe, the blue one, you can see that competitiveness does make a difference when it comes to economic outcomes. And see, the point to note here is a 1% or 2% difference between the most competitive or the least competitive may look small to you. But if you compound it over the country's history, it makes a huge difference, not just in terms of economic growth, but also development, which is very, very important. How do countries increase competitiveness? I mean, these are some of the things, multiple economic variables, socio-economic factors, etc. We all know labor, infrastructure, and human capital, etc. I just want to walk you through the backdrop that we are in. Why is this going to be important now and going forward? As you can see, the world seems to be literally on the edge, and this is not made up by me. I mean, this is an Economist cover. And the threat to world trade, I mean, we are seeing the world economy being run by not trigger-happy people, but Twitter-happy people, I guess, right? I mean, one tweet and suddenly the markets are down the next day, and we are moving tweet after tweet, and this is the situation we are in. In terms of the trade war that all of us keep reading about, keep referring to, or forced to follow or keep track of, this is basically cutting your own nose to spite the face, right? I mean, every single time, and we are seeing almost every single fortnight, some of the other country being targeted with some tariff or some threat on trade. And things have changed fundamentally. Let's not make a mistake. Let's realize, and it will be better for us to be able to recalibrate our growth narratives and strategies. This is not the US that we know or we have known so far, right? Can multilaterals change this or can come in to help? I think the global architecture is undergoing a huge change. Yes, the IMFs of the world are important, but the wherewithal or the ammunition is not really enough to be able to shield economies and countries from what is happening right now. There is going to be a huge recalibration that is required. And as central banks extinguish the monetary firepower, there is another race to the bottom that will happen, which is tax cuts. The US started that. It depends on the fiscal leeway that governments have, but this is one more race to the bottom that countries will get into. And this is the sign of things. I mean, this is an actual picture in the US. And what they're saying is this sandwich will last longer than a White House employee. I mean, this is how short cycles have become. Just look at the monetary policy from the Fed. This year, 2019 calendar, we began the year by thinking that interest rates probably will continue to rise. And then we thought, oh no, they're going to pause. And suddenly you've had the central bank actually cut the rates just very recently. If a central bank has to do an about turn within 6 months, that tells you how short cycles have become. And this is no joke, I mean, that we see here. And we always thought that India will continue to be the services economy of the world. Probably not anymore. The shelf life, you can see, is getting shorter even here. So, and just to give you a picture, I mean, a far longer cycle, we need to be aware of the cycle. This is a 2000 history, economic history captured in one single slide. You can see how economies that have dominated, and you've seen India and China typically over the last 200 years lose their economic might. I mean, from a combined more than 80% or 70%, they became just about under 4% together early this century. So I think this just tells us how economic cycles can influence a lot of these things. and competitiveness is at the heart of this story that we see. We were reminded of the $5 trillion goal that the government has. This is some arithmetic that we require, essentially in nominal terms. We've been growing at 11%. We need to grow at 13 odd percent to be able to achieve this. Yes, this is an aspirational and positive target, will take some doing, but is definitely a positive step and a positive target to be aspiring to achieve. I'll just take you through some of these recommendations. I promise you I won't bore you with the details. I also don't want to steal the thunder from the authors. I'll just reveal a little bit in terms of the recommendations and the chapters and leave you with the report to have a look. These are some of the themes that have been addressed in this report. Digital world, manufacturing, agriculture, mobile money, tourism, trade, financing of infrastructure, power sector, smart infra, education and health, tax policy, and inclusive growth. Some of these recommendations you can see, I'll just walk you through very quickly. Digital India, all of us know how important it is. It's the digital age. Data is the new oil. And there are extensive recommendations that have been made with the 2025 target. Essentially, convergence, regulation, legal support, and we all know how important the troika of this is going to be for digital. Manufacturing, essentially the focus has been here on MSMEs. There are cues on how China has gone about doing this and the kind of state support that has helped this particular sector, and recommendations have been made to that effect. And essentially, public infra investment is required to ease the supply constraints that we have. Reimagining agriculture in India. I think what we require now is the 1991 kind of moment, complete liberalization of agriculture. The government needs to get out of this particular sector, make way for private sector. We need promotion of farm level investment. Corporate investment in agriculture is very, very limited, very minuscule, even in, say, 2019. This needs to change. Then there is this problem of scale. We need mechanisms for responding to excess production. Like the last 2 years, we've had excess output, and we are struggling with that. We need to strengthen crop insurance, need to efficiently use inputs, diversify sources of income, adopt state-specific policies, and expand markets. And the Niti Aayog has come out with doubling of farm incomes theme, and they're going about it very seriously. We hope that we do achieve those targets. Mobile money and financial inclusion. India is one of the poster boys when it comes to mobile and use of mobile technology and financial inclusion. The numbers that you see on Aadhaar and the JAM Trinity are phenomenal. I think India is going to be a case study for the developing world when it comes to harnessing technology for furthering some of these financial inclusion variables, subsidies, etc. We have a huge subsidy bill, and we are beginning to target or spend it wisely through the use of technology. Tourism, again, has immense potential. When this government came to power in 2014, we heard a lot about tourism. There are multiple suggestions being made. Something which sounds very simplistic, say, single window clearance. Why is this important? Why do we keep repeating the same thing? I think we know from experience from our group, one of our companies listed entities is into this business. We require about 70 odd permissions at the state level and another 38 odd, which includes multiple, central government, state government put together. So more than 100 clearances from government, various government entities. And therefore, some of these suggestions might sound simplistic, but I think are still at the heart of why we haven't really been able to expand. Power sector, again, I mean, we are in a happy situation in terms of at least supply. The government has endeavored to put electricity into each house. This is the aspiration. And I think what some of these recommendations here also relate to renewable energy, solar generation, promotion of reservoir-based peaking of hydro or things like that. So I think some of these suggestions, again, may sound simplistic, but if you go through the document, you'll find a lot of insight and experience of the authors. Trade policy, again, like I told you in terms of the backdrop, we are going through a huge generational change when it comes to trade, and India needs to participate in the global value chain of goods as well as services. We need an integrated and comprehensive policy on goods as well as services which is our forte. We also need data and digital-only procedures and compliances. Again, we need simplifications of rules, regulations, etc. And we need thought leadership when it comes to engaging with the academia and think tanks and the government. We need to act as one. Infrastructure financing, again, I mean, we need at least $1 trillion worth of spending over the next 5 years. This is what we've been aspiring to do. There are multiple suggestions which include enhancing long-term debt flows, developing municipal bond markets, and importantly, reinforcing dispute resolution mechanisms. And the government has been talking about monetizing some of these existing projects. We are seeing important developments that are happening when it comes to the PPP architecture. We are seeing things like HAM, and also we need to expedite the setting up of 3P India Institute to support PPP. Education and health, I think the government has clearly shifted its focus and emphasis decisively on things like education and health. The Niti Aayog document talks about how are we striving to double the spend as a percentage of GDP over the next, say, 5 to 7 years. This has been something that we all have been looking forward to. And there are multiple suggestions here, including on public schools. I mean, saving public schools from being only the poor man's option. We need to integrate healthcare and primary education. And again, government spending really has to go up. Introduction of better English education. I think for multiple reasons across states, I mean, we've seen politicians really not really emphasizing the need for English education enough. And again, multiple suggestions. I'm not going to bore you with each one of these. Tax policy, again, as we speak, remains a critical issue, an issue of heartburn from FPI perspective, or even the taxation that has been introduced at the highest tax slab. I think we need stability in taxation policy. We need India to embrace a slightly simpler tax architecture, and like the recommendation you see, simplification of tax laws. I think this cannot be emphasized enough. We need reduction in tax litigation. We keep looking at the numbers from budget on the tax foregone every single year, which runs into lakhs of crores every year, and enabling tax policy for growth. I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your attention.